The sterile lights of the operating room at Chicago Memorial Hospital hummed like a distant warning as Dr. Kyler Bennett made the final stitch with hands that never shook in surgery, but trembled every night in the dark. Across town in the apartment they had shared in secret for 7 years, Elias Grant stood by the window, staring at the empty street below, knowing the man he loved was once again burying the truth that could set them both free. Kyler finished the procedure, saved the young patient's life, and stepped into the scrub room, peeling off his gloves with mechanical precision, while his mind replayed the argument from the night before, when Elias had whispered, "I cannot keep being your secret, Kyler." The words had cut deeper than any scalpel, yet Kyler had only pulled him close and said not yet the family would never understand. Now as he changed into street clothes, his phone buzzed with a text from his mother, reminding him of the family brunch tomorrow where a suitable young woman from their social circle will be joining them. He typed back a quick confirmation, feeling the familiar weight of expectation settle on his shoulders like lead. Driving home through the glittering Chicago night, Kyler rehearsed the lies he would tell Elias about the brunch being a work-related networking event. He parked in the underground garage, took the elevator up, and found Elias waiting in the living room with 2 glasses of wine and a quiet hope in his eyes that always made Kyler feel both cherished and condemned. They talked about the surgery, the patient's recovery, the small victories that kept them going at the hospital, where they had first met 8 years earlier during Kyler's residency, when Elias was the new pediatric nurse who stayed late to comfort a scared child. Their friendship had grown slowly through shared shifts and late-night coffees until one rainy evening, after losing a patient, they had kissed in the empty on-call room, and everything changed. But from that first night, Kyler had insisted on secrecy, citing his conservative judge father, his socialite mother, and the family legacy that demanded a wife and heirs. Elias had agreed at first, believing love would be enough, but 7 years had worn the agreement thin. Tonight, Kyler kissed him softly, changed the subject to dinner, and later when Elias fell asleep, Kyler lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, tracing the lines of the man he adored and wondering how much longer he could pay the price of his silence. The next morning, he left early for the brunch in the suburbs, arriving at the sprawling family estate where his mother greeted him with a hug and his father with a firm handshake. The young woman, Sarah, was charming, intelligent, and everything his parents had described, yet every laugh Kyler forced felt like another brick in the wall, separating him from the life he truly wanted. He returned home that afternoon to find Elias unusually quiet. A mutual colleague had mentioned seeing Kyler at the estate with a woman, and the rumor had spread through the hospital grapevine like wildfire. Elias did not accuse, he simply asked if the brunch had gone well, and Kyler lied again, saying it was nothing important, just family obligation. The hurt in Elias' eyes was unmistakable, but he nodded and suggested they cook together to unwind. As they chopped vegetables side by side, Kyler felt the guilt rise like bile, yet he pushed it down, choosing the path of least immediate pain. That night as they watched a movie, Elias rested his head on Kyler's shoulder and whispered, "I love you no matter what." Kyler held him tighter, but the words he wanted to say remained locked inside. The following week at the hospital, tension simmered when a senior nurse pulled Kyler aside and hinted that people were talking about how close he and Elias seemed. Kyler denied everything with a laugh that sounded hollow, even to his own ears, claiming they were just good friends who worked well together. Elias overheard the conversation from the hallway, and later in the break room his voice cracked as he confronted Kyler, asking how many more times he would erase them. Kyler promised it was temporary, that he needed more time to figure out how to tell his family without losing everything. Elias walked away without another word, leaving Kyler alone with the echo of his own cowardice. The days blurred into a cycle of stolen moments at home and careful distance at work, where Kyler excelled as the brilliant surgeon but felt like a fraud in his own life. His father called midweek, pressuring him to attend an upcoming charity gala with Sarah as his date to keep up appearances. Kyler agreed again, trading another piece of his soul for the illusion of control. Elias found the invitation on the counter, and this time the confrontation was sharper, with Elias saying, "I cannot watch you choose them over us forever." Kyler begged for patience, insisting the gala was just business, but inside he knew the walls were closing in. As the week ended, Kyler stood on their balcony alone while Elias slept, wondering if the love they shared was strong enough to survive the truth, or if his fear would finally break it beyond repair. The price of his concealment was mounting daily in the form of sleepless nights and the growing distance in Elias's touch, yet he still could not bring himself to pay it in full. Monday morning brought an emergency triple bypass that demanded every ounce of Kyler's focus, yet even as he operated, his thoughts drifted to the hurt he had seen in Elias's face the night before. The patient pulled through, and the team applauded, but in the locker room, Elias avoided his gaze, choosing instead to chart notes in silence. Their drive home was quiet until Elias finally spoke about how his own family back in California had always accepted him, how they kept asking when they could meet the man who made their son so happy. Kyler gripped the steering wheel tighter and repeated the same refrain: soon, but not now, the timing is wrong. That evening, Elias suggested they take a walk along the lakefront to clear their heads, and for a few precious hours they held hands in the shadows where no one could see, pretending the world was kind. Back at the apartment, they made love with a tenderness that carried the weight of unspoken fears, and afterward Elias traced patterns on Kyler's chest, asking what he was so afraid of losing. Kyler answered honestly, for once, saying, "My family's approval, the career I built on their support, the life they planned for me." Elias nodded, but reminded him that none of those things could replace the years they were losing to secrecy. The next day at the hospital, a new rumor circulated after Sarah posted a photo from the brunch on social media, tagging Kyler as a dear friend. Colleagues whispered, and one resident even joked to Kyler about his mysterious personal life. He shut it down quickly, but the damage was done, and when Elias saw the post during lunch, his eyes filled with quiet resignation. They argued in the stairwell, where Kyler promised to delete the tag and limit future appearances, but Elias said promises were no longer enough. That night, Kyler received a call from his brother Marcus, who casually mentioned hearing about the photo and warning that their father was starting to ask questions about why Kyler never brought anyone home. The pressure mounted like a vice, and Kyler found himself agreeing to another family dinner the following weekend. Elias discovered the plan when he saw the calendar entry, and this time he did not argue. He simply packed a small bag and left for a friend's place, saying he needed space to think. Kyler spent the night alone, replaying every decision that had led them here, from the first kiss to the thousand small lies that had become their normal. The family dinner was a carefully staged performance where Kyler smiled through stories of his surgical triumphs while his mother hinted at wedding bells with Sarah. He endured it all, feeling like a marionette whose strings were pulled by generations of expectation. When he returned home, Elias was waiting with red-rimmed eyes, and the conversation that followed was the most honest they had shared in months. Elias laid out the pain of being hidden, the isolation of never being introduced as the partner, the fear that Kyler would never choose him fully. Kyler listened and for the first time admitted that he hated himself for the hiding, but still could not see a way out without destroying the foundation his life was built on. They fell asleep tangled together, but the peace was fragile, and the coming days would test it further. The hospital charity gala approached like a storm on the horizon, and Kyler's father insisted he bring Sarah as his date to maintain the family image. Kyler reluctantly agreed, telling Elias it was a professional obligation that could not be avoided. Elias attended the event anyway, working the pediatric wing fundraiser in the same ballroom, and the sight of Kyler laughing with Sarah across the room was a knife to the heart. During a quiet moment in the hallway, Elias pulled Kyler aside, demanding to know if this was the life he really wanted. Kyler whispered that it was all for show, but the words rang false even to him. Later, when a tipsy colleague made a comment about Kyler and Elias being more than friends, Kyler denied it vehemently in front of witnesses, leaving Elias stunned and humiliated. The drive home was filled with silence until Elias said he could not continue like this, and Kyler begged him to stay, promising that after the gala he would find a way to come clean. The following week brought a major case where Elias assisted Kyler in surgery on a child, and their professional synergy reminded them both of why they had fallen in love in the first place. In the recovery room, Elias held the child's hand while Kyler monitored vitals, and for a brief moment the walls between them dissolved. But reality crashed back when Kyler's mother called to praise how well he and Sarah had looked together at the gala. Kyler ended the call quickly, but Elias had overheard, and the ensuing argument ended with Elias saying, "Maybe we need time apart." Kyler panicked and suggested a weekend trip to a cabin up north where they could be alone without fear. The trip was a temporary reprieve filled with long talks and reaffirmations of love, but on the last night, Elias asked directly if Kyler would ever tell his family the truth. Kyler hesitated too long, and the silence spoke volumes. Back in Chicago, the rumors at the hospital intensified, and a senior doctor pulled Kyler into his office, warning that personal entanglements could affect his promotion track. Kyler assured him there was nothing to worry about, but the conversation left him shaken. That evening, he found Elias packing again, this time for a short visit to his family in California, saying he needed to remember what acceptance felt like. Kyler watched him leave, feeling the first real crack in his carefully constructed world, and for the first time questioned whether the price of his concealment was worth the love he was losing. Flashbacks flooded Kyler's mind as he sat alone in the empty apartment, remembering the day they met when Elias had rushed into the trauma bay with a critically ill child, and their eyes had locked across the chaos. Their friendship had blossomed over months of shared shifts and quiet conversations about dreams and fears until a night a brutal winter storm stranded them in the hospital, and the kiss that changed everything happened under flickering emergency lights. Kyler had pulled back immediately, whispering, "We cannot do this," but Elias had smiled and said, "Why not if it feels right?" From then on, they built a secret life of stolen weekends and hidden affections while Kyler balanced it with family obligations that grew heavier each year. Now with Elias gone, Kyler drove to the family estate unannounced, and during a tense conversation with his father, he almost confessed everything, but the words stuck in his throat when his father praised his dedication to the family name. Returning home, he called Elias, who sounded distant yet loving, and they talked for hours about the early days when love had seemed invincible. The call ended with Elias saying he would return in a few days but needed time to sort his feelings. Kyler spent the interim throwing himself into work saving lives while his own heart bled, and when Elias came back, they embraced like men who had survived a shipwreck. The reunion was sweet, but the underlying issues remained, and a new confrontation arose when Kyler's brother Marcus visited unexpectedly and sensed the tension between the two men. Marcus pulled Kyler aside later, asking point blank if there was something he needed to know, and Kyler lied once more, claiming Elias was just a roommate. The lie felt heavier than ever, and that night after Marcus left, Elias confronted Kyler about the pattern of denial, saying each lie chipped away at their foundation. Kyler promised to do better, and for a while they found a fragile peace, but the approaching family reunion weekend loomed like a guillotine. At the reunion, Kyler's mother introduced him to yet another potential match, and the pressure became unbearable. Elias waited at home, checking his phone every few minutes, and when Kyler finally returned with guilt etched on his face, the argument that followed was their most intense yet, with Elias declaring that love should not require such constant sacrifice. Kyler held him through the tears and whispered that he was trying, but the truth was he still did not know how to break free without losing the world he had always known. The days that followed were a blur of work and quiet evenings where they avoided the topic, but the undercurrent of impending change grew stronger. Elias's family planned a visit to Chicago and insisted on meeting Kyler as the partner they had heard so much about. Kyler panicked and suggested they meet as friends instead, claiming it was too soon for full disclosure. Elias agreed reluctantly, but the visit was awkward, with Elias's parents sensing the deception and pulling their son aside to ask why he was still hiding. The conversation left Elias devastated, and back at the apartment, he told Kyler that if he could not introduce him properly, then perhaps they should reconsider the relationship. Kyler begged for one more chance, promising to tell his own family soon, but the words felt like empty echoes. A week later, a medical board meeting required Kyler to present a case, and Elias was asked to assist as the lead nurse. Their professional collaboration was flawless, but afterward in the parking garage, Elias said the pretense at work was killing him slowly. Kyler proposed they take a real vacation somewhere far away where no one knew them, and for 2 weeks in Hawaii they lived openly, holding hands on beaches and dancing under stars. The freedom was intoxicating, and on the last night Elias asked if they could bring that openness home. Kyler nodded, but the moment they landed in Chicago, the old fears returned. The hospital welcomed them back, with new rumors circulating after someone spotted them at the airport looking too close. Kyler denied again, this time in a staff meeting, leaving Elias feeling utterly betrayed. The fight that night ended with Elias sleeping on a couch and Kyler staring at the ceiling, wondering how many more betrayals love could endure. The next morning, Kyler's father scheduled a lunch meeting to discuss Kyler's future in the family firm of expectations, and during the meal, he mentioned hearing whispers about Kyler's personal life. Kyler deflected, but the seed of suspicion was planted. Returning home, he found Elias waiting with plane tickets to California, saying he needed to go home for a while to think. Kyler watched him leave again, feeling the weight of his choices crushing him, and for the first time, he considered what life without Elias would look like. The days without him were empty, and when Elias called to say he was extending his stay, Kyler broke down in tears alone in their apartment, realizing the price he was paying was his own happiness. A betrayal came from an unexpected source when Kyler's closest colleague and former mentor, Dr. Ramirez, accidentally mentioned in a department meeting that he had seen Kyler and Elias together at a private dinner, looking very much like a couple. The room fell silent, and Kyler denied it immediately, but the damage was irreversible as whispers spread through the hospital like wildfire. Elias learned of the comment from a friend, confronted Kyler, demanding to know why he had not defended them. Kyler explained it was to protect their jobs, but Elias saw it as another layer of denial. That evening, Marcus called Kyler after hearing the rumor from a hospital contact and pressed for the truth. Kyler finally admitted he was in love with Elias, but begged Marcus to keep it secret from their parents. Marcus agreed reluctantly, but the conversation left Kyler shaken. The following weekend at a family barbecue, Marcus's discomfort was noticeable, and when their father asked what was wrong, Marcus almost slipped. Kyler pulled him aside in the garden, and the brothers argued fiercely with Marcus, accusing Kyler of living a lie that hurt everyone. The argument ended with Kyler storming off, but the seed of exposure had been planted. Back home, Elias sensed the change, and when Kyler recounted the conversation, Elias said it was time to stop running. Kyler promised to tell his parents at the next family gathering, but the fear paralyzed him. A few days later, during a high-profile surgery that made headlines, Kyler was interviewed on local news, and when asked about his personal life, he mentioned being single to keep the facade intact. Elias watched the interview from the break room, and the pain in his eyes when Kyler returned was profound. They spent the night talking through the hurt, and Elias revealed he had been offered a position at another hospital in California closer to his family. The threat of separation forced Kyler to confront the reality that his choices were pushing the man he loved away. The internal conflict reached a boiling point as Kyler weighed the love against the legacy, and for the first time the scales began to tip. The annual family gala arrived, and Kyler's parents had arranged for Sarah to be his escort once more. Elias decided to attend as hospital staff, and the tension in the ballroom was palpable. During his speech, Kyler stumbled over words about dedication and legacy, feeling the eyes of both his family and Elias on him. Afterward, in a private corner, Elias whispered that if Kyler could not claim him tonight, then he would leave for California permanently. Kyler felt the world narrow to that single moment, and the years of fear collided with the love that had sustained him. His father approached, then praising the speech and introducing Sarah again, and Kyler felt the final crack in his resolve. He excused himself, pulled Elias onto the terrace under the Chicago night sky, and in a voice trembling with emotion, he said the words he had buried for so long. The confession spilled out in a rush of years of love-hidden pain and the realization that losing Elias was worse than losing everything else. Elias listened with tears streaming, and when Kyler finished, they embraced as equals for the first time in public. But the moment was shattered when Kyler's father witnessed the embrace from the doorway, and the confrontation that followed was brutal, with accusations of betrayal and disappointment ringing through the night air. Kyler stood his ground, declaring that his love for Elias was not a choice, but his truth, and the family ties strained to the breaking point as his father walked away without another word. The gala ended in chaos with whispers and stares, but Kyler and Elias left hand in hand for the first time without hiding. The days that followed brought cold calls from his mother and silence from his father, while the hospital buzzed with the news. Elias supported Kyler through the fallout, and they leaned on each other as the price of truth became clear in lost invitations and strained conversations. Yet in the quiet moments they rebuilt with honesty, and the bond that emerged was stronger than the one forged in secrecy. Kyler faced the board with his head high, and though his promotion was delayed, the respect he earned from living openly was a new kind of legacy. Weeks turned into months, and the initial shock within the family softened slightly when Kyler's mother reached out to meet Elias over coffee. The meeting was awkward but genuine, and for the first time Kyler saw a glimmer of acceptance in her eyes. His father remained distant but sent a short note acknowledging the courage it took to speak the truth. At the hospital, Elias and Kyler worked side by side openly, and the team that once whispered now rallied around them with quiet support. They moved to a new apartment overlooking the lake where sunlight filled every room, and the balcony became their sanctuary for honest conversations. Kyler continued saving lives with the same skill, but now with a lighter heart, knowing the man he loved stood beside him without shadows. Elias thrived in his role, and his family visited, often bringing warmth that helped heal the wounds. The couple celebrated small victories like their first public date at a downtown restaurant and the anniversary of the day they met. Yet the scars remained as reminders of the years lost to fear and the decisions that had cost them so much. As they stood on the balcony one evening watching the sunset paint the sky in gold, Kyler turned to Elias and said the confession had saved them both. Elias smiled and replied that the real rescue was choosing each other every day after. Their story was not perfect, but it was theirs, built on truth and the willingness to pay the price for love. In the end, as they held each other under the Chicago stars, the question lingered for anyone who had ever hidden their heart. Was Kyler's long silence a necessary shield against a harsh world, or was it ultimately a betrayal that nearly cost him the only love that truly mattered?